I just found out my wife of 10 years cheated on me with our neighbor, then manipulated me into signing over half our $600, $0 estate, claiming it was for our children, only to discover she secretly transferred it all into her sister's name, and now she's planning to take everything and leave me broke. How do I fight back? I never thought I'd be the guy to catch his wife cheating, especially not after 10 years of marriage. But one night I stumbled on something that turned my whole world upside down, something I couldn't ignore or brush off. The crazy part, it was so obvious in hindsight, but I was blinded by trust and a false sense of security. That night I found myself staring at a series of texts on her phone, messages that made my stomach turn. They were from our neighbor, Mark, and the way she was talking to him, so casual, so intimate, made me realize she'd been lying to my face for months. Her name's Lisa. She's beautiful, sure, but she's also manipulative, sneaky, and she's been playing me for a fool. We met in college, married right after, and for the first few years, everything seemed perfect. We had a nice house, 2 kids, and what I thought was a solid life. But over the last year, I'd noticed her getting distant. She'd stay out late, make excuses, and whenever I asked about her phone, she'd suddenly become defensive, like I was invading her privacy. I brushed it off at first. Maybe she was stressed, maybe she was just tired. But the signs kept piling up. Then came the night I caught her. I was looking for my old watch in her jewelry box, something I always kept there, and I accidentally knocked over her phone. It fell open and I saw the messages. She was talking to Mark about meeting up, about keeping it a secret, and how she needed to do this for herself. I felt my face go numb. My mind raced. I knew I had to see more, so I started digging deeper, and that's when I found the emails, hidden folders, private chats, all revealing her plans to meet him at the motel last weekend. The worst part, she lied to me about everything. She said she was going to her sister's house, that she'd been feeling stressed and needed a break. She told me she loved me, that I was the only one she wanted, but her actions told a different story. She was sneaking out, lying about where she was, and I could feel the betrayal sinking in. It wasn't just about the sex with Mark, though that was bad enough. It was the way she manipulated me into trusting her, into signing over half of our estate. I was furious. Not just hurt, but furious. I felt like I'd been played for a sucker. I remembered how she'd begged me for money last month, claiming she wanted to fix the house or save for the kids' college. But now I knew she'd been funneling that money into her sister's bank account, some scheme she'd cooked up behind my back. I couldn't believe I'd been so blind. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and most of all, stupid. How could she do this to me after all these years? That night, I sat alone in the dark, staring at her phone, trying to process everything. The woman I married, the woman I loved, was out there sleeping with our neighbor and lying about everything. The trust was shattered, and I knew my next move had to be careful. I wasn't going to let her walk away with everything, her plans to take the house, the money, and leave me broke. That was unacceptable. I had to figure out how to fight back, how to protect what was mine, and how to deal with the pain of betrayal. But first I needed to confront her, and that's where the real trouble started. The next morning I woke up feeling like I'd been hit by a truck. My mind kept circling back to what I'd seen, those texts, those lies. I knew I had to confront her, but I also knew she'd spin it, deny everything, or try to manipulate me into doubting my own instincts. Lisa's a master at twisting things around, making me question myself even when I knew I wasn't wrong. Still, I decided I couldn't let her get away with it without a fight. I waited until she left for her sister's house, or so she said. I didn't trust her anymore. I sat down, pulled out her phone, and started digging through her messages more thoroughly. I needed to understand just how deep her deception went. As I scrolled through the private chats, I found more than I expected: plans to meet Mark again, secret exchanges about money, and even a few photos of her in bed with him. The images made my stomach churn, and I felt a surge of anger I'd never experienced before. I also found out she'd been talking about how she'd manipulate me into giving her what she wanted. She told Mark she'd play the wife until she got what she needed, then leave me high and dry. That's when I saw the real extent of her scheming. She'd been plotting her escape for months, all while pretending to be the loving wife. I felt sick. The woman I promised to love and cherish had been planning her exit, using me to get her hands on our estate, then secretly transferring everything into her sister's name. I was stunned. How could she do this? How could she be so cold? I knew I had to get her to admit everything, but I wanted to do it on my terms. I called her when she was supposedly at her sister, pretending I wanted to talk. When she picked up, I kept my voice calm but firm. I told her I knew about her affair and her schemes. Her reaction was wild. She gasped, then started lying immediately. "You're crazy," she said. "You're just jealous. I love you, I swear. Mark means nothing. It's just sex. It's just a mistake." But I wasn't buying it anymore. I had proof. I told her I had seen the messages, the photos, and I wasn't going to let her manipulate me anymore. Her face twisted with anger and frustration. She started crying, accusing me of invading her privacy, of ruining everything. She begged me to believe her, said she'd never cheat on me, that it was just a moment of weakness, that she'd stop seeing Mark. But I knew better. I told her I'd think about everything, but I wasn't going to let her gaslight me into thinking I was overreacting. I told her she needed to come home and face the consequences, but inside, I was already planning my next moves. I knew I had to be smart. This wasn't just about catching her. It was about protecting what was left of my life. After I hung up, I sat alone for a long time, feeling a mix of rage, sadness, and betrayal. I looked at the mess she'd left behind, the empty bottles, the scattered clothes, the false promises. It hit me how she'd lied to my face every day, how she'd manipulated my trust into her own advantage. That's when I realized I couldn't just confront her and hope it would all go away. I had to be strategic. I started thinking about the estate, the money, the property. She promised she'd keep everything for the kids, but I knew she'd been planning to take everything for herself and her sister. I remembered the transfer she'd made into her sister's name. I had to act fast if I wanted to stop her. I reached out to a lawyer I'd known from years back, explained the situation, and asked for advice. I couldn't believe how fast everything was unraveling. I'd trusted her with my life, my home, my savings, everything. Now I had to fight to keep what was mine. I felt a cold determination settle in. Lisa thought she could manipulate me, lie her way out, and leave me broke. Well, I was about to show her she was dead wrong. This was just the beginning of the war. The day after I confronted her, I started putting my plan into motion. I knew I had limited time before she managed to finalize her scheme completely. I called the lawyer again, explained everything I'd uncovered, her affair, her secret transfer of the estate into her sister's name, the manipulative lies, and asked for immediate legal advice. The lawyer, a sharp guy named Greg, told me I needed to act fast. He said there were ways to freeze the transfer or contest it if I had enough evidence. He also warned me that Lisa's manipulative side was dangerous, and I had to be careful not to let her spin her way out of this. I couldn't believe how much I'd been played. I trusted her with everything, our life savings, the house, the kids, and now she was planning to take it all and leave me with nothing. I felt numb, like I'd been punched in the gut. The betrayal cut deep, but what hurt even more was the realization that I'd been so blind for so long. I'd overlooked the signs, trusted her words, and now I was on the verge of losing everything I'd worked for. The anger started bubbling up again, but I knew I had to keep it in check if I wanted to win this fight. That afternoon, I decided to set a trap. I told her I'd decided to give her a chance to come clean, to tell me everything she'd been hiding. I sent her a message, carefully worded, calm but firm, asking her to meet me at the house that evening. I knew she'd come, desperate to keep her lies intact. When she arrived, I was waiting in the living room, a copy of the legal documents from Greg in my hand, along with the evidence I'd gathered. She looked surprised, but her bitchy smirk quickly returned. "What's all this?" she sneered, trying to act innocent. I laid everything out on the table, her affair, the secret transfer, the messages, the photos. Her face drained of color. She stammered, tried to deny everything, but I cut her off. I told her I had proof, and I wasn't going to let her manipulate her way out of this. I said I'd be contacting the authorities if she didn't cooperate, that I was prepared to fight for what's mine and for the kids' future. Her eyes darted around, and for a moment she looked genuinely panicked. Then she started crying, throwing herself on me, begging me to believe her, claiming she'd been under so much stress that she loved me, that Mark was just a mistake. She kept insisting she'd fix everything, that she'd stop seeing Mark and that she'd make it right. But I wasn't buying it anymore. I told her I'd already talked to the lawyer, that I was going to take legal action, and that she'd have to face the consequences of her lies. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about what I'd uncovered, about the life I'd thought we had, and how everything had been a lie. I was furious at her, hurt beyond words, but mostly I was determined. I knew I had to be strategic if I wanted to win this fight. I started drafting a plan to challenge her in court, contesting the transfer, seeking full custody of the kids, and making sure she couldn't just walk away with everything. I also started gathering more evidence, recordings, bank statements, anything that could prove her scheme. In the meantime, I kept my cool. I didn't let her see my anger, didn't let her manipulate me into doing something I'd regret. But inside, I was boiling. I knew she'd try to spin things, to turn the tables, but I had enough proof now to fight back. I realized that this wasn't just about money or betrayal. It was about standing my ground and making sure she didn't get away with destroying everything I'd built. I was ready for war, and I'd do whatever it took to come out on top. Over the next few days, I threw myself into action. I contacted a different lawyer, someone with experience in family law and asset protection. I explained everything again: her affair, her manipulation, the transfer of the estate into her sister's name. I wanted to make sure I had all my bases covered. The lawyer, a no-nonsense woman named Karen, told me that the key was to get a court order to freeze any further transfers and to start the process of contesting the transfer of assets. She warned me that Lisa would probably do everything she could to hide or move money, so I had to be quick and precise. I also visited the bank with her statements, trying to track where the money had gone. Sure enough, I found the transfer she'd made to her sister's account, an enormous chunk of our $600 estate. It was all there in black and white. That was the proof I needed to stop her. I felt a strange mix of relief and fury. Relief because I now had tangible evidence. Fury because she'd been planning this for months, maybe even years. While all this was happening, Lisa kept trying to manipulate me. She called crying, begging, saying she was sorry and that she'd do anything to fix this. She tell me I was overreacting, that I was just jealous, that Mark was just a mistake. But I saw through her lies now. I wasn't about to fall for her sob stories anymore. I told her I was working with lawyers and she needed to be honest with herself, because her lies weren't going to save her this time. One afternoon, she came home unexpectedly. I was waiting in the living room, legal papers spread out on the table. She looked surprised, then annoyed. "What are you doing?" she snapped. I told her I was filing for an emergency court order to freeze all her accounts and assets. Her face turned pale and she started to panic. "You can't do that," she hissed. "You're overreacting. This is all a mistake." I looked her straight in the eyes and said, "No, Lisa, this is justice. You've been lying, cheating, and scheming to take everything I worked for. That ends now." She tried to deny everything, but I had the evidence. I told her I was also requesting full custody of the kids and that I'd be pushing for a legal separation. Her bitchy attitude shifted into full-blown panic. She started crying again, saying she'd lose everything, that she'd ruin me if she had to. I just sat there, calm but firm, knowing I had to stay in control. If I let her manipulate me now, I'd lose everything. Later that night, I sat alone in the dark, contemplating my next steps. I felt a strange mix of adrenaline and heartbreak. I loved this woman once, but now I saw her for what she was: a manipulative, selfish woman who'd been planning her escape at my expense. I realized I couldn't fix this alone, and I needed to prepare for a long legal battle. I'd fight her for the house, the money, and most of all, for my kids' future. I knew she'd do everything possible to sabotage me, but I was determined not to let her. The most shocking part: I found out she'd been secretly talking to her sister about how to hide the money, how to make it look like she wasn't doing anything wrong. I felt betrayed all over again. She lied to me about everything: her supposed love for me, her intentions to stay, her promises to fix things. All of it was just a cover-up. She'd been planning her exit for months, and I was just now catching up. I knew this was the beginning of a war, and I had to be ready for a fight that I never wanted to have. I wasn't about to let her walk away with everything I had worked for. The legal battle was now in full swing. I spent every waking moment coordinating with Greg and Corinne, gathering more evidence and preparing for the court hearings. I knew Lisa was trying to spin her version of events, claiming everything was a misunderstanding, that she loved me and the kids, and that I was overreacting. But I had. The proof: texts, bank transfers, her own words. I couldn't let her manipulate her way out of this one. The more she tried to deny, the more I realized how deep her deception went. One day, I received a call from Greg. He told me that Lisa had transferred some of the estate into her sister's account, but because I'd filed the paperwork quickly, the court had frozen those assets. That was a huge relief, but I knew she'd try to find a way around it. She was clever. She'd probably come up with some new scheme to hide the money or transfer it again. I had to stay one step ahead. In the meantime, Lisa's attitude was getting worse. She'd show up at the house, demanding to see the kids, throwing tantrums and accusing me of ruining her life. I kept my cool, refused to be baited, and told her all communication had to go through the lawyers. I could see her frustration boiling over. She'd always been good at lying, at twisting things to her advantage, but now her facade was cracking. I could tell she was panicked, desperate, and that she was planning her next move. One afternoon she showed up unannounced, looking furious. She started shouting, accusing me of trying to steal her future, and said she'd destroy me if I kept this up. I just looked at her and said, "Lisa, you've lied enough. The truth is out. You've been scheming for months, and I'm not letting you walk away with everything. The court's on my side now, and I'm going to fight for my rights and for the kids." Her face twisted in rage, but she knew she was cornered. Her bitchy attitude turned into a frantic attempt to manipulate me, but I'd heard enough lies. That night, I sat alone, feeling the weight of everything. I realized how much I'd been betrayed by her lies, by the woman I thought I knew. I'd trusted her with my life, my money, my future, and now I was fighting to keep what was rightfully mine. I'd never been more angry or more determined. I knew this wasn't just about the money or the house. It was about standing up for myself after being so thoroughly played. I promised myself I wouldn't stop until I had justice. Lisa might have thought she could manipulate the system, but I was prepared to fight her every step of the way. Meanwhile, I discovered she'd been covertly talking to her sister about how to hide the rest of the estate, how to avoid the legal freeze, and even how to make it look like she was still innocent. That realization made my blood boil. She'd been lying to my face for months, planning her escape behind my back. I started thinking about how to expose her completely, how to prove that her entire story was a lie. I knew I had to be smart, patient, and relentless if I wanted to come out of this with anything left. This was the worst betrayal I'd ever experienced, but I also knew I had a choice: give up and let her walk away, or fight to protect what's mine. I wasn't about to let her take everything I'd worked for, not without a fight. I'd come too far, and I was ready to go all the way. The war was just beginning. The court date finally arrived, and I was ready. Everything I'd gathered, the proof of her affair, the bank statements, her secret transfers, the recordings of her lies, was laid out. Clearly, Lisa showed up in her usual bitchy attitude, trying to act innocent, but the judge saw through it immediately. I could feel her panic setting in as I presented my case, explaining how she'd manipulated me into signing over half our estate under false pretenses, only to secretly transfer everything into her sister's name. The courtroom was tense, and I knew this was the moment to finally put an end to her schemes. The judge listened carefully, asking questions, reviewing the evidence, and ultimately ruling in my favor. The court issued an order to freeze all of Lisa's assets, including the transfer to her sister, and declared the estate was to be divided fairly. The judge also awarded me full custody of the kids, recognizing the pattern of manipulation and deceit Lisa had displayed. I felt a strange mix of relief and exhaustion. After months of betrayal, scheming, and fighting, justice was finally starting to turn in my favor. Lisa's face twisted with rage and frustration as she realized she'd lost her grip on her plans. She screamed, tried to argue, but the judge was firm. Her lies had been exposed, and her manipulations were no longer going to work. As she was escorted out of the courtroom, I couldn't help but feel a sense of victory, but also a deep sadness for everything I'd lost: my trust, my marriage, the life I thought I knew. In the weeks that followed, I worked tirelessly to rebuild my life. The court proceedings uncovered more hidden accounts and transfers, and I was able to recover a significant portion of the estate. Lisa's plans to leave me broke and destitute were thwarted. I filed for a divorce, and although it was painful, I knew it was the only way to truly move on. I saw the pain in her eyes when she realized she couldn't manipulate her way out of this, and that gave me some measure of closure. Looking back, I learned a lot from this nightmare. Trust is fragile, and I'd been naive to think I knew everything about the woman I married. But I also learned that if you're willing to fight for what's right, even when it feels impossible, you can come out stronger. I realized I should never ignore the signs of manipulation or betrayal, and I must always protect what's mine, whether it's money, family, or integrity. Now, I'm rebuilding my life, focusing on my kids and my future. I don't know what Lisa's doing now, but I hope she finally sees the damage she caused. As for me, I'll never let anyone manipulate or betray me like that again. Trust is earned, and I've learned the hard way that sometimes you've got to fight for it, especially when it's worth everything.